Remember the politician's most famous saying, "Let's cut spending"? Well, in this curious case, a couple of brainless men decided to take the scissors to another level, cutting off a friend's hand to claim insurance money. From now on, when people say they would never do anything for money, back to 2008, when two South Carolina men, Gerald Hardin and David Player, deemed amputating a hand an acceptable trade for the not inconsiderable sum of $671,000. Get your popcorn ready and delve into this insane story that defies logic and decency. With all of you, the incredible case of Gerald Hardin and David Player, the madmen who mutilated their ill friend's hand to claim insurance. In a convulsive 2008 year marked by crisis in the heart of South Carolina, two men team up in a scheme so twisted that not even the screenwriters of crime dramas like Law & Order or CSI Las Vegas could have imagined. David Player, the self-proclaimed mastermind, along with Gerald "Trey" Hardin, starred in an insurance fraud case that left everyone with goosebumps. David Player, a 58-year-old man at the time, and Gerald Hardin, 35, teamed up to conspire against insurance for hospital expenses and accidental physical mutilation. In fact, herein lies the most shocking part. To carry out their master plan, they convinced Michael Weaver, a friend who was mentally disabled, to agree to an amputation of his left hand in exchange for a minimal amount of money relative to what these con artists planned to receive. Then, as if they were taking notes from the most exciting detective TV series, one night, after unknown excesses with various substances, Hardin carried out the amputation in question by tying Weaver to a tree and using an incredible pole saw. We could say that on a night of excess, sometimes a little cutting and messing around is necessary. Does anyone else think these guys could have found a simpler way to make money? People with mild intellectual disability, MLD, have the wonderful ability to carry out various activities and understand their environment with occasional or limited support throughout their lives. That was the case for amputation victim Michael Weaver, a 52-year-old man with an IQ ranging from 54 to 64. Usually, these people have a guardian, someone to guide them and manage their legal affairs. In this instance, David Player filled that role for Weaver, who would end up being the mutilated victim. In 2008, Player and Hardin's stories became intertwined when they began to devise this plan to circumvent their financial difficulties through an insurance ruse. That's when they carried out the macabre plan that involved the persuasion of Michael Weaver. Player managed to convince Weaver to allow Hardin to amputate his left hand, all in the hope of obtaining a sum of money from the insurance company. As we are recounting on that fateful night, the cruel act took place, and Hardin used a pole saw to amputate Weaver's hand. Who would have imagined that someone could nip his financial problems in the bud like that? The version presented to the insurer claimed that Weaver's hand, a disabled person, had become entangled in the branches of a tree. So without much choice and on the premise of helping, Hardin amputated Weaver's hand to free him from the entanglement. He was quickly rushed to the hospital in the hope of being able to surgically reattach the hand, but unfortunately, the medical efforts proved in vain, and the entire hand had to be amputated. Player then went to the insurance company and filed a claim for medical expenses, asking for a staggering $671,000. Don't you think these scammers took the expression "pitching in" to an unimaginable extreme? As a reward for his participation, Hardin received a down payment that allowed him to buy a new truck and pay a few months' rent. For his part, Weaver received a minimal sum that didn't even come close to compensating for the physical damage sustained, and of course, he could not regenerate his hand. Undoubtedly, one of the most remarkable features of this case is the callous way in which Player planned everything to make sure he kept the lion's share of the money. Initially, there was talk of $375,000, but thanks to Player's efforts, the figure eventually rose to $671,000, arguing that medical incompetence had made it impossible to save Weaver's hand. Incredibly, these guys elevated the term "claim" to a new level. As we all know, insurance deception is unlawful behavior at the federal level, carrying with it the possibility of facing lengthy periods of incarceration up to substantial fines and bail. In the case of the three individuals involved in Sumter, South Carolina, their track record came under the scrutiny of a federal investigation that spanned considerable time, so that they are currently in the process of sentencing. The event, which had its beginnings in 2008 and reached the courts in late 2012, finally came to a conclusion when the legal ramifications became apparent. During the judicial process of this case, former court judge Cameron McGowan Curry expressed, "This is one of the most shocking crimes I have had the opportunity to evaluate in my years in the legal field. Player made decisions to use policies, recruit accomplices, plan and organize the incident. He controlled the funds from start to finish. Player's assessment of Attorney Holliday as the mastermind is accurate. Undoubtedly, this assessment stems from the cold, calculating approach of the master of chicanery. The manner in which Player took advantage of the vulnerability of a disabled person and a third party in order to profit exorbitantly through insurance certainly puts into perspective how far some are willing to go for money." David Player, recognized as the mastermind behind the scheme, now faces a sentence of 14 years in prison until 2027, while Gerald Hardin was sentenced to 3 years and 5 months. Interestingly, despite Hardin's direct involvement in the Amputation Act, his candid confessions and cooperation with the authorities contributed to a relatively more lenient resolution of the case. On the other hand, Player chose to conceal the whereabouts of the $671,000 obtained from the fraud rather than show remorse, which had a negative effect on his conviction. The difference in attitudes between the two perpetrators was noted in court and highlighted by attorney Winston Holliday, who described Player as a person marked by cruelty and lack of empathy. Gerald Trey Hardin III, one of the main characters in this intriguing case, played a key role in the actions that led to the insurance fraud and shocking amputation of Michael Weaver's hand. Convinced by David Player, who called himself the mastermind behind the scheme, Hardin agreed to carry out the amputation with the intention of obtaining part of the proceeds through the fictitious insurance claim. It should be noted that Hardin was an alcohol and drug addict, so it was very easy to take advantage of him. Moving forward in time to late 2012, Gerald Hardin admitted in Columbia Court that in 2008 he colluded with Player to use a pole saw to perform the painful amputation on the hand of a mentally disabled person, all with the intention of pocketing money from the insurance company. As we anticipated, despite his direct involvement in this horrendous act, Hardin adopted a different attitude during the development of the case compared to Player. Undoubtedly, this cooperation proved to be crucial in solving the case and ultimately resulted in his conviction. Unlike Hardin, David Player chose to deceive investigators by concealing the destination of the funds obtained from the fraud, reflecting a clear lack of remorse and a willingness to continue his deception. However, in the eyes of the law, Hardin played a central role in the twisted insurance fraud and amputation scheme that took place in South Carolina in 2008. His involvement in the brutal act to Michael Weaver, while disturbing, was distinguished by his subsequent cooperation with authorities and his willingness to admit responsibility in the case. Thus, the disparity in attitudes between Hardin and Player underscores the moral complexity of their role in this tragic incident. The mastermind behind the plan in this intriguing case of insurance fraud and amputation played a crucial role in the planning and execution of events. In addition to persuading Michael Weaver to participate in the scheme, who faced challenges to his mental capacity, Player oversaw much of the action from inception to obtaining the insurance money. Unlike Gerald Hardin, however, his attitude toward the legal implications was markedly different. Instead of showing remorse for his actions, Player attempted to mislead investigators by concealing the destination of the $671,000 obtained from the fraud. Specifically, federal officials previously said Player used the money to buy a house for his son, build a storage unit on his property, and purchase a Dodge Dakota for Hardin. Once Player is released from prison, he will be on probation for 3 more years, and in that time, will be undergoing recurring drug testing and conspiracy and credit counseling. Hardin will also have to participate in a substance abuse treatment program. The ethical complexity of his role in this case is evident through his actions, which transcend the mere execution of the scheme and encompass the management of the ill-gotten funds. What a way to want to secure a future. Undoubtedly, these individuals really have a special talent for seeking unusual loans. The Strom law firm fully understood the seriousness of the crime of this insurance fraud and the federal criminal charges it entailed. Insurance fraud, being a federal crime, can trigger lengthy prison sentences and substantial fines. All three men involved went through years of federal investigation before facing their respective prison sentences. This illustrates the law's firm stance against such crimes and highlights the need to address the issue of insurance fraud with absolute seriousness. The case of this insurance fraud in South Carolina highlights how some people are capable of manipulation and deception in pursuit of extreme financial gain. The amputation of Michael Weaver's hand and the attempt to deceive the insurance company left a deep mark on the region's legal history. The contrasting attitudes of David Player and Gerald Hardin in the face of legal consequences highlight the inherent complexity of human nature in such exceptional situations. This case also underscores the importance of addressing insurance fraud with the seriousness it deserves, as it can cause significant economic damage and undermine confidence in the insurance system. Through an unwavering commitment to justice and rigorous enforcement of the law, it is hoped that cases such as this one will act as a warning and deterrent to those who would consider resorting to insurance fraud. Who would have guessed that a bogus insurance claim would lead to this convoluted legal maze? What are your thoughts on this outlandish case? If you were left wanting more, you still don't know this story of another insurance hunter? I wouldn't miss it.